Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hey, how in the world are you? Welcome to another episode of Kilroy's, Lord, Outlaws and Legends and Beyond the Music. And we're going to have a good story today and reminisce about a good friend of mine who passed away recently, Kris Kristofferson. What a nice guy. Kris was born in Brownsville, Texas, and that's about as far south as you can get. One step to the left or right, you're in Mexico. And of course, he's from a military family, so they did travel quite a bit to different parts of the country. Spent some time in California where his dad was stationed, but eventually he made it to around the world, of course. And he's a Rhodes Scholar. A lot of people don't know what a Rhodes Scholar is. A Rhodes Scholar is someone that has had incredible grades from their collegiate career or time spent learning in a college here in the United States. And you can apply to be a Rhodes Scholar, which is in England, and it's a very, very high education school. And he was accepted there, so he became, after graduating, a Rhodes Scholar, which tells you he was one smart son of a gun. But I first met Kris. He moved to Nashville, and he wanted to be a songwriter. Well, you just don't walk in and say, hey, I'm a songwriter. You got to know some people. You got to hang out and so forth. So he luckily got a job at Columbia Studios as a janitorial occupation. That's what he was, a janitor. He emptied ashtrays, what have you, but he gave him the opportunity to, when someone walked into the studio that was recording there, that he could go up and say, hey, I'm Kris Kristofferson. How are you doing? I've been a big fan of yours. Get to know some people. From there, he moved over to a place called the Tally Ho, which was a beer joint. I mean, definitely a beer joint. Sold a lot of beer. And a lot of us went over there in the afternoon to have a beer and shoot the bull and swap lives and what have you. And Kris was a bartender. Now, who would think that a Rhodes Scholar would be popping tops on long necks for a bunch of hillbillies? But that was Kris. He was there to meet people, get his foot in the door to become a songwriter. And did he ever become a songwriter? This floored me. He had a song that he wrote with Mary John Wilkins called Help Me Make It Through the Night. Sammy Smith recorded that and had a #1 record on it. And yes, it was a beautiful record. And he wrote songs like For the Good Times. Yep, Ray Price. Loving Her Was Easier Than Anything I Ever Had to Do. Willie Nelson had that one. And then the big one, Sunday Morning Coming Down by John Cash. He wrote Me and Bobby McGee. Janis Joplin. I mean, she screamed one out and had a big record on it. That girl was from Port Arthur. How did Janis get out of Port Arthur and out to San Francisco to become a rock singer and so forth? I don't know how she did it, but she did it. But Kris had that song for her, and then Jerry Lee Lewis recorded it, and Jerry just rocked the dickens out of Me and Bobby McGee. He wrote so many great songs. Sunday Morning Coming Down is an interesting deal. Most people know that Kris absconded with a helicopter from the National Guard Armory in Nashville. Why did he do that? How did he do it? Well, a lot of people didn't know that Kris was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he was a second lieutenant. I think I stand to be corrected on that. If anybody's listening or watching, and I'm in error on saying that, please let me know. I'm doing total recall on this, no notes or anything, so sometimes I might make a mistake. I sure don't mean to. But he ended up coming out a captain. Now, his family were all military. And when Kris told them, I think I'm going to Nashville and be a songwriter, according to Kris, and we talked about this, it was almost a fist fight. And I say that jokingly, but they were vehemently against him going to Nashville and not following his military career. And it was so bad that he was more or less disowned. I mean, he was ostracized from the family. We don't want anything to do with you. If you're going to Nashville and be a songwriter, instead of pursuing a long career in the military, it's over, buddy, get out of my house and so forth. Kris said it was a sad moment for him. but he had a burning desire to follow his dream, and that was to be a songwriter. And did he follow the dream? Whoa, so many good records. The helicopter story does not stop at Johnny Cash's, but I will tell you that story. He landed in Johnny Cash's front yard. A lad came out. It could have been Marty Stewart. I'm not sure, because Marty at that time, I think, no, he wasn't married to Cash's daughter at that time. Somebody came out of the house. Cash's home was right on Old Hickory Lake, and the young man handed him the cassette that Kris had given him. And Cash said, "Did that guy flying that helicopter that landed in my front yard give you this?" And he said, "Yep." Cash threw it in the river. I mean, you know that Kris stole the helicopter. Well, I'm not going to say he stole it. He borrowed it because he returned it. Yeah, but how he pulled that off, I don't know, other than he knew how to fly a helicopter. After leaving Cash's place and watching his tape thrown into Old Hickory Lake, he decided to go out and visit a friend of his named Johnny C., S-E-A-Y. Johnny was living on Marty's farm out near Franklin, Tennessee, and Kris just went over and said, "I'm going to go visit Johnny C." And he took that helicopter and landed it on Marty Robbins' place. Eventually, he got it back to its owner, the U.S. government, and put it back into the National Guard Armory. And, you know, I don't know, I don't think he got into any trouble. I don't even think he was chastised for it. And I think one reason why, Kris always had that big smile. I imagine the only time he wasn't smiling, and this is a guess, okay, because Kris never told me about it, but if I had to do a movie with, what's her name? Golly, Barbra Streisand. I would not be smiling if I had to do a movie with Barbra Streisand. I'd just soon do one with, that woman that was protesting the Americans over in Vietnam. Jane Fonda. She's another one that would take that smile off your face. But Kris was always smiling, a good guy. Had a lot of fun with Kris, and he was always laughing, like I said, and we'd drink beer, and he'd get up out of the chair, go back behind the bar when somebody needed a beer, pop the top, take it to him. Hey, he was there to write songs. And when he ran on to Mary John Wilkins, and they had Help Me Make It Through the Night, it opened a lot of doors, like my hit song, Will, and that's where that string of hits came from. And the same tape that Cash threw in the river was Sunday morning coming down. Actually, he threw it in the lake, but it was wet. 6 months later, they showed it to him, and it became like the biggest record Cash had ever had, Sunday Morning Coming Down. What a great song that was, and the lines that Kris came up with. You know, one that always stuck out in my mind is Sunday Morning Coming Down, I'm going to put on my cleanest dirty shirt. That was a great line, and I'm going to go out there. But, you know, I could tell you stories forever and ever about Kris. Our friendship was good, and we had fun when we talked and we visited. But he and Willie were close, and then the Outlaw thing came in. They called it the Outlaw. We didn't call it Outlaw. It was a bunch of guys wanting to do music their way, and it broke the tradition of Nashville, where you walk in with the same players. You have a producer that tells you what to do, what to sing. These guys wanted to do it their way. And it was Willie and Waylon leading the pack, two of my favorite friends forever. And then it was joined by Tom Paul Glaser, who was and Jesse Coulter was in there. And then the Highwaymen came along. Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Kris Kristofferson. Who else was on there? Waylon, Willie, Kris, Johnny Cash. Yep, he was there. He ended up doing a show with the Highwaymen with the same guy that threw his tape into the Old Hickory Lake. But that was a very, very successful tour, and they had a record called The Highwaymen, which went #1, and those four guys could pull it off. Kris was never what I would consider a really good singer. He was just a great writer and a great interpreter of the songs that he wrote. So the songs that he did have played on the radio, I attribute the success to more his interpretation of the song than actual singing. I always think of singers and artists as salesmen. Yeah, they're salesmen. You know what they have to sell? They have to sell the song they're singing. No different than a car salesman selling a car. They have got to deliver and sell that song to where when you hear it, you're believing what that guy or that gal is saying. And Kris mastered that, where not being a good singer, he was a great interpreter. Perhaps going back to his education of being a Rhodes Scholar, seeing everything he saw in Vietnam, flying helicopters, stealing helicopters, going to Johnny Cash's, going out to Marty Robbins' farm in Franklin, Tennessee. I laughed just thinking about that helicopter flying over Franklin. They're saying, "What's it flying so low for?" Oh, now he's landing out there in Marty Robbins' farm. Well, that's Kris Kristofferson, and I certainly hope that you enjoyed the things that, that about Kris that I've been able to tell you. And he eventually moved over to Hawaii and lived over there. Willie, pretty close to Willie Nelson over in Hawaii, and I'm sure that they saw each other a lot. Willie played golf a lot over there. I don't know, can't tell you for sure whether Kris was a golfer or not, but Willie was pretty much an addicted golfer. Matter of fact, I think they were almost next door. Kris had two houses, one on the Big Island and one on a smaller island. I think Willie's place is on the Big Island. So they weren't really neighbors, but they saw each other a lot. But listen, I want to ask you guys and gals something. If you have a particular story you'd like to hear on a particular artist, it doesn't have to be any particular story, but an artist that you admire, I will try my best to use the recall of 4 decades in Nashville to tell you stories that I know on that particular artist. If I don't know them, I'll write you back and say, hey, I'd have to be making up stories or going to Wikipedia or Googling them and see what they did. Everything I tell you is coming right off the top of my head from what I saw, what I lived for 4 decades in Nashville, and 4 decades in Nashville, and passing it on to you. And you can write us, okay? Write us and do me a favor. Subscribe to this, okay? Because we're trying to build this up and keep the memory of all these great singers that have gone on and the great ones that are still living also. So be sure and like and subscribe. And let me tell you about something else. We have a sponsor that I'm very proud of called, Feeds. Special Feeds. There it is right here. Total Feeds. I mean, it is so special. They have Total Equine, which our horses have been on for 15 years or more. They have Total Bull. A lot of the bulls bucking on the PBR Tour and in the PRCA Pro Rodeo are on that feed. The Bill's Muscles, drops the fat and all. They have Total Canine. We've got the 2 pups right now are getting ready to start on Total Canine. They've got Total People. I mean, you don't have to. I watch these commercials on TV on these feel-good pills that they're selling with all the powdered vegetables in them and what have you. And it seems like they have to be in a special place to take those. Someone's in the garden, they're taking their pills. Somebody's getting off a golf cart, taking their pills, not somebody else. But they're always in a place. With Dr. Anderson's, his formula, you just get up in the morning, go get a glass of water, take your pill, you're good for the day. In the meantime, I'm going to ring off right now, but it's sure been fun telling you about everything I know about Kris Kristofferson and what a wonderful guy he is and what a loss we've occurred. It is just a sad thing. But hey, stay tuned. We've got another one coming up for you very shortly. If you have anything, write me, tell me, Kilroy, do you know anything about this? Can you talk about this? If I know these people, which after 4 decades up there, I know just about everybody. So I'm going to ring off now and say, God bless each and every one of you and have a great day. Adios to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.